I want to talk to you very briefly about the opening of the new Abbey Works at Margam near Port Talbot in South Wales. Although this works isn't the property of Richard Thomas and Baldwin, it belongs in fact to the Steel Company of Wales, an associated company. We have nevertheless had a good deal to do with it. Its opening marks the most important development in the British steel industries program since the end of the war, and I thought therefore that you'd like to hear something about it. The developments at Margam are part of long-term plans to develop still further the South Wales steel and tinplate trade. Plans which started to be formulated before the end of the war. It was realized many years ago that if South Wales were to retain its worldwide prestige, a bold and imaginative step forward had to be undertaken. The problem was a big one, so big that when it became possible to take action, it soon became evident that the cooperation of several companies would be required. And it occurred to me that there was really only one practical solution, namely to form an entirely new entity to which existing companies would contribute sufficient assets to form a broad enough basis for all that had to be done. In the end, 4 major steel concerns, including RTB, agreed to pool their resources, and together they created the Steel Company of Wales, and thus made the new developments possible. The new works add greatly to the productive capacity of the British steel industry, but coinciding, as it does, with a relative shortage of raw materials, this increased capacity will temporarily aggravate certain production problems, and one immediate result will be to accelerate the closing down of some of the older and less efficient works. When I talked to a representative of Ingot News some weeks ago, I explained this, but pointed out that in many ways Margam was coming into operation at a convenient time, since there were unusual opportunities for absorbing redundant labor. It must be borne in mind that it was always anticipated that when the modernization program got into full swing, some of these older works would inevitably close. Indeed, it would be meaningless to talk of modernization if this were not so. Now, no one is more conscious than myself of the fact that great technical developments, such as those being carried into effect by the Steel Company of Wales, can alter completely the pattern of life over wide areas. And there are always some who see in such developments an element of tragedy as well as of hope. To any such who feel that the tide of progress may leave them stranded, let me say, as chairman of RTB and as chairman of the Steel Company of Wales, that not only will preference be given to any employees who may temporarily be rendered idle by the closing of works, but I'm confident that the works at Margam and the new tinplate works at Costa, which is nearing completion, present South Wales with greater opportunities for creating new auxiliary industries, and thus greater opportunities for employment than it has ever had. Margam is obviously an epoch-making event in the history of our industry. It should bring new prosperity to Wales. It should eventually create more employment and not less. And far from endangering the position of RTB as a whole, it should prove a stimulus to our own activities, ranging as they do from Redbourne to Ebbw and the Midlands. There's room for both companies. Both have plans for development, each within its own sphere, plans which don't conflict with one another. The two companies have always worked in harmony, and I'm confident that they always will.
The inaugural ceremony of this great works took place on Tuesday, July 17th, and a beautiful, hot, sunny day it was. The vast, streamlined works was decorated with flags, and the new paint shone in the sunshine. Guests had been arriving all the morning, and the Mellon Griffith Band entertained them with selections from their repertoire. The special train from London, Minister of Supply, and Mr. Robins, Minister of Labour. They were greeted at the reception point by Mr. and Mrs. Lever. And the whole party was kept busy for a few minutes by absolute batteries of cameramen. After luncheon, the tour of seeing a 10-ton ingot being weighed and put through the slabbing mill, they proceeded along the length of the mill to the control table of the finishing mill, where the actual ceremony itself was pinpointed. The Chancellor was shown a lever which would operate the slab from the delay table through the 6-stand continuous mill. Again surrounded by an army of photographers, Mr. Gaitskell operated the lever. The slab travelled forward through the mill, out at the run-out table, and so to the coiler. Do you notice particularly at this point the similarity to the Abbey plant? This mill is much wider, of course. It rolls to a width of 80 inches.